But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the deck. What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alright soldiers, so we're going to be on our last episode of Inverse Academy for set 7. We're going to be doing the Havencraft deck. I'm so sorry that it took an extensive amount of time to get all this out here and onto this channel. I just wanted to make sure I got all of the 2024 stuff done before we start focusing on the 2025. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the deck. Alright, so in this video we're going to be talking about Machina Haven. So this is a deck that really isn't too popular, I would say. I know a couple of Haven players are running to this deck and it's pretty decent, but there's probably more players who don't know what this deck does versus players who do. And hopefully by the end of this video you know what this deck is going to be doing, what it's going to be setting up for, what to look forward to, and you know, everything else. Alright, so starting off with the pros and cons of the deck. So for pros, we have Storm, board wipe, healing, defensive, and then for the cons, we have setup, early game, and bricky. Alright, so starting off with the first pro, we have Storm. So there are a couple cards that you can add into Havencraft that do have Storm, and then there's a certain card that has Storm that's also going to be going for your game plan in the deck. Alright, so moving on into the next point, we have board wipe. So one thing about Havencraft is known for is that it's the queen of removal. There are some instances where, you know, they might have a hard time removing one body, but usually for Havencraft, they always have an answer in terms of removing. Alright, and the next point we have is healing. So one thing we also know about Havencraft is that it is probably one of the best decks that is healing out there that I can think of outside of maybe, you know, Dragon or something like that. But Havencraft is definitely known for its removal and its healing. So in this deck, you're going to be doing a lot of healing. Alrighty, and lastly we have defensive. So what control deck would be a control deck without at least a solid defense? So we have the board wipe, we have the healing, and then we have some storm followers. So this deck can do a little bit of both in terms of mid-range, but it can get very defensive when you get into those 4+ play point plays. Alright, so moving over into the cons, so the first point that we have is setup. So if we're going to be playing a mid-range / control-ish deck, what would we be if we were able to just start the game, starting to play cards out, and then start controlling the game? No, we have to wait for those 3+ play point plays to really start sequencing things together. Of course, we're going to try and trade bodies into bodies or use our spells to get rid of others' opponents' things, but we do need time to set up and do things. And of course, riding off of this setup con, we do have the early game. So the early game is where we are the weakest. So this is probably the turns where you can really do a lot of damage to Havencraft because they're just gonna have to either take it or trade their bodies that they played for fanfares into other bodies. So the early game is probably the most vital. And then last that we have is bricky. So this deck doesn't draw too much, even though we do have lots of storm, board wipe, and healing. There aren't that many cards that are going to be drawing us cards like the other decks. So it is a little bricky. Alright, and without further ado, let's talk about our legendaries. So we have Limonia, Flawed Saint. So she's a 3-cost 3/2. You can evolve her for 7, and when she comes into play, you put a repair mode token into your EX area. By using her activate ability by banishing repair mode from your EX area, this card's evolve costs 1 less this turn. While on her evolve side, you can evolve her and then destroy each enemy follower on the field. While using an activate ability of 0 play points to select the Machina follower that costs 2 or less in your cemetery and summon it, you can only activate this once per turn. Alright, so looking at the card alone, we already know that this evolve is going to cost at least 6 just from the fanfare of Limonia itself, but with a EX area full, we can get this down to 2, and then with other cards, we can probably get this down to 0 with using other cards' effects. Alright, and talking about the evolve, just destroying each enemy follower on the field is just too good, while also summoning a 2-cost Machina follower from your cemetery is just a 2-in-1 value while getting rid of your opponent's board, especially if they like board spammed you. Alright, so enough about our legendary. Let's talk about the ways we're able to get repair modes into our EX area and the Machina followers that are going to be helping us in this game line. So starting with our first card, we have Marlon, Light of Balance. He's a 3-cost 3/3. You can evolve him for 1, but when he's played, each player puts up a repair mode token into their EX area. So a pretty decent mid-game play, especially on turn 3. We're going to really want to evolve our followers, or turn 4, whatever turns you're really on. You want to play a follower and then get some value out of it and then evolve it and then potentially swing into a follower that may be either being aggressive on you or just have a 4/4 follower that might be doing some damage later on. And while moving on into the Saintly Core, this is the 1-cost amulet for Machina for Havencraft, which looks absolutely amazing. So when it comes into play, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you may reveal a Machina card from among them and add it to your hand, put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order, while using the activate ability to bury this card to put a repair mode token into your EX area. But the weird thing about this is you can only activate this if there are at least 2 Machina followers on your field. And if any of you are playing the same version of Shadowverse Evolved that I'm playing, is that cards are not really going to stick. There are some cards that have weird numbers that are able to get away with murder sometimes, but I feel like Saintly Core is probably going to be a little harder to remove because there aren't really that many cards that have aura. But keeping the Saintly Core on the field and then waiting until you get into those bigger play point plays where you're able to maybe put 2 bodies on the field at the same time, or maybe sometimes you might get really lucky and your opponent doesn't have the removal, or they don't think your low cost card is going to be worth. You can just go ahead and bury this, put a repair mode into your EX area, and then you can set up for Limonia. Alrighty, and next up we have Iron Knuckle Nun. So she's a 2-cost 2/3. She has ward, and when she's played and when she dies, you put a repair mode token into your EX area. So opening a card like this is just going to go ahead and start your game playing off pretty nicely because your opponent is going to have to answer this card. So playing her and then, waiting to ward her if your opponent's not playing aggressively, or if they are playing aggressively, you can go ahead and ward her up, and then they have to swing into her first, and you get 2 repair modes. Alright, and last but not least, we have Robo Falcon. So it's a 2-cost 1/3. You can evolve for 1, it has Storm, and it has a strike ability, so when it swings, you put a repair mode into your EX area. Then if there are at least 3 cards named repair mode in your EX area, give this follower +1 attack. So I want to go ahead and apologize, I did not have the Robo Falcon evolved up here, so I want to go ahead and fix that now. So he still has Storm on the evolve side, but when you do evolve, you put a repair mode token into your EX area. So if you do have the Iron Knuckle Nun that has been set up already, that's able to put those 2 repair modes and you're not using them, going ahead and going into Robo Falcon the very next turn is just very good value. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about those uses for the repair modes. Alright, so looking at Father Refinement, he's a 5-cost 4/4 with Rush. When he comes into play, you put 2 repair mode tokens to your EX area, and then you recover 2 play points. While he does have a strike ability and swings, you draw a card, and there are at least 5 cards named repair mode in your EX area, you get to draw 2 instead. Alright, so the takeaway here is that we're going to be recovering those 2 play points to use the very next card that we're going to be talking about. But recovering those 2 play points while also getting those 2 repair modes, if you are playing the game as you should with the Machina Haven deck and having EX area full of repair modes, and then having to use them as minimally as possible, you can go ahead and get into some bigger plays with our next spell card. And that spell card is Augmentation Bestowal. So it's a 2-cost spell. You can choose one of the following. You can either 1, banish 2 cards named repair mode from your EX area, search your deck for a Machina follower that costs 3 or less and summon it, and then shuffle your deck. While on the other ability, you can banish 5 cards named repair mode from your EX area, search your deck for a Machina follower that costs 6 or less and summon it, then shuffle your deck. So this is where we're going to get our bodies from. If we're going to have an EX area full of repair modes, if we want to get rid of 2 and then use the rest of our EX area abilities for anything else. But this is going to get our 6-cost or less Machina followers out of our deck and then putting them into play. So things like Technolord, Father Refinement, if you want to go ahead and get them, any of the Machina followers that you can think of that are 6 or less. Alright, so let's talk about removal for the deck. So we wouldn't be a Havencraft deck if we didn't have some solid removal. So of course we didn't talk about the Marlone Light of Balance evolve. So when he's evolved, you select an enemy follower that costs X or less on the field and destroy it. X equals the number of cards in your EX area. So of course with a maximum cap of 5, we have to choose a follower that's at least 5 or less that's going to be able to destroy, but it only matters for however many repair modes are in your EX area. And while of course we have Jeanne d'Arc to also deal 2 damage to the field, and then the evolve to deal that extra 2 damage, so dealing 4 to the field isn't bad, so think of Jeanne d'Arc as another removal tool that you can use. And I believe on this channel we didn't give this last card the spotlight that she needed, and that is Kaide. So Kaide is one of those cards that's just going to spot removal something while also giving you a body that has ward 2. So I think she's very good, and then she's really going to check if your leaders have 5 defense or less, gets you at that 10, and then she also gets to draw you a card. Alright, so let's talk about our neutral. So of course, if we're going to be rocking Machina, we're going to need our neutral Machina followers, that being Mecha Gun Wielder, Robo Goblin, Mecha Wing Angel, and Technolord. Of course, looking at Mecha Gun Wielder, we're only going to be using the ability to get repair modes into our EX area unless the occasion ever occurs where we might need an assembly droid to just take care of one follower with 3 of ours, which most of the time we probably might need to go for a repair mode. Robo Goblin is actually very perfect for this deck just because it's going to be putting a repair mode token into your EX area after you evolve them, and then, you know, using that last word to just swing into a follower and get a repair mode. Another thing about Mecha Wing Angel, she is a neutral follower, but she is also nice in terms of removal too by having at least 5 Machina cards in your cemetery, so you get to deal 4 damage to something and you get a repair mode. Alright, and lastly we have Techno Lord. So this is going to be one of the cards that we're going to be getting off of our second ability for Augmentation Bestowal to go ahead and banish those 3 Machina cards, that being one of them being the Augmentation, because it will be in the cemetery by the time this Techno Lord procs. So we can go ahead and get rid of that being the one of them, and then 2 other cards we don't really care about, we're not going to use. And then we have the multi-choice ability between choosing between these 4 abilities. Alright, so let's look at our other options for the deck. So we have Alana's Prayer Diamond Master, Aether White Wing, and we have Lapis Glorious Seraph. Alright everyone, hear me out. Alana's Prayer can work in this deck, of course. If you don't want to run a Super Limonia build, which is okay, because you gotta remember we are banishing the repair modes from our EX area. If you want to go for an Alana's Prayers build, it's gonna be a little hard to do, but it can work. It's just the thing with Alana's Prayer is that it's going to be mapped out pretty easily, because as soon as you play Alana's Prayer out and then you have, you know, X amount of repair modes in your EX area, it's like, okay, well, I know what you're going to be wanting to do, so I'm either going to use Techno Lord to get rid of this card, Alana's Prayer, or I'm just not going to let you heal at all. But soon the format is changing, so Alana's Prayer might be coming into rotation pretty soon if you want to get spicy with it, so I'd say try it out in set 8. Alright, and next up we have Diamond Master. So this is not a bad card, especially with the Robo Falcon, and then using it with maybe Ruby Falcon if you want to use for a maybe more aggressive line of the deck. But Diamond Masters is not something bad to look at, because there are cards that have Storm in this deck, so using cards with Storm and then swinging cards with Storm is just going to do a lot of damage. Alrighty, next up we can talk about the staple that's kind of almost a one of in almost every Havencraft deck. It really hurts to see it in the early game, but you love to see it in the late game, Aether of the White Wing. So this is going to be a good card to just get us any Havencraft follower that we want out of our deck. So this can get our father out to give us 2 repair modes to recover 2 play points. So essentially you got 2 bodies for essentially 5. So that feels pretty good. Alrighty, and lastly we have Lapis as our last card. So this is a pretty decent card. I'm not going to say it's going to be our go-to, but just healing 2 at the end of your turn every turn is very good. This is a hard card to remove just because of the 7-line defense. So if your opponent doesn't have the hard removal, they're going to be swinging a lot of bodies into this and using up a lot of their attacks just to get rid of this card. And then when you do get rid of this card, having X amount of prayer counters on it is just going to draw you that many cards. So I do want to give an honorable mention to Heavenly Aegis. So this is another card that you can think about in your other options of things that you want to do, because as Havencraft we get into the late game, and then sometimes we need to just decide on what kind of boss monster we want to go for, what play lines, and Heavenly Aegis is not a bad card to just look into. Alright soldiers, we have made it to the grade of the deck. We are going to be looking at a custom brew that I made for Machina Haven. You know, build around it as you please. Don't take it with a grain of salt. This isn't going to be a, you know, BCS ready deck that's going to like wipe the floor with everybody, but it's going to be something solid that you can work on, that you can really play with as with your friends or your play group or at locals, and then, you know, maybe top or just have some good results with. Alright, so this is what I came up with when making the deck. It has all the decent Machina things that you're going to need to get your repair modes and stuff, some decent removal. For the late game, I did decide that I was going to go for the Heavenly Aegis route, which is pretty nice. But for a little bit of backup for some decent storm damage, I think Akane is not that bad to think about. So whenever you are building this deck, think about some other sets and stuff like that. Just having a 7/7 storm is not too bad to think about. But yeah, like I said, there's going to be a deck code down in the description below, so feel free to look at that if you want to. Alright, so getting back into the grade of things, this deck is actually pretty decent, pretty strong I would say if everything goes right. But that's the thing about this deck, is everything does have to go right, and you have to make sure you survive through the early game. And with how Shadowverse is kind of played, we really do play off of the early game. Some decks just really just wipe face off of you before turn 4 even happens. So I think this deck is a solid B tier deck. I think this is a pretty decent deck if you want to just, you know, play at locals, or if you want to really try your hand at a BCS with topping with this, because I think Havencraft has the potential to top, but it is very hard and everything has to go right for you to top. Alright soldiers, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here because this is the last Inverse Academy episode that we have for set 7. We aren't going to be going over anything else. I'm sorry I left out for any of the rune lovers that are out there. Trust me, I'm a rune lover. I played through the Machina rune and I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely not it. So I'm sorry I didn't get to that, but we will be talking more about Tetra when she comes out in the later sets, or when she becomes more relevant in later sets from, you know, Earthright and stuff. But alright soldiers, be safe in whatever you do tonight, and be safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do.